Hello folks, this is the tale of the melted muffler, exhaust waterlock muffler. So I was coming into Alert Bay, or trying to get there, and the exhaust blew off the muffler. This was the second time this had happened, and it was the pipe going from the engine. This is the mixing elbow that was on the engine to the muffler, and it would pop off right there. Excuse my dirty hands, but I've been working. And so when I got to Alert Bay, I looked at the exhaust hose and all the way to the back of the boat, and it was pretty rotten. So I said, well, I'll just replace all this. This piece here, which comes off the engine, was looped way down, rubbing the drive shaft. So I said, well, I'll fix that problem too. And goes to the muffler. I'll put this nice 90-degree proper Syntex, really expensive elbow in. And so I did all that, new exhaust pipe, all the way up to the mixing elbow on the engine, and put it all back together, plugged this hole up the top with that fitting there. That was the muffler that was in there. That was a new one. And proceeded to head to Port Hardy. Now I had made sure that there was a lot of water coming out of the exhaust, out of the back of the boat. And there was, tons. This is the siphon loop. And you're wondering why I'm just bringing that up all of a sudden. This goes from the heat exchanger on the engine. The raw water comes from the ocean through a pump, through a strainer, or through the strainer, then the pump, and then into the heat exchanger, which keeps the engine cool. And then it goes to this, which is called a vented loop, and then comes out of here and goes into the mixing elbow. They call it a mixing elbow because this is where the exhaust goes in and comes out, but water is mixed in at that time to cool the exhaust, and you get water and exhaust going through into the muffler. The pressure from the exhaust pushes the water out the exhaust of the waterlock muffler, and then out the back of the boat. This is a homemade vented loop, and this little tube here would come off and go into the muffler, onto that nipple. And so what was happening is the water was coming in from the heat exchanger, going up through that nipple into the muffler at such a flow rate that it looked like it was working properly. There was a lot of water coming out of the exhaust at the back of the boat, which indicates that you have plenty of exhaust cooling. But that was not so. It melted that new muffler and put a split in it. And I smelled plastic all the way to Port Hardy. So when I got to Port Hardy, I started at the actual place, the seacock, where the water comes in, which goes to the strainer, which goes to the raw water pump on the engine, through the heat exchanger, and as I've said before, through this homemade siphon loop, and then back into the mixing elbow. And I got positive flow once I took the tube off, disconnected it from here. I got positive flow, really good flow. But then when I took just a hose, and there was a nipple here, and filled it with water and blew on it, nothing happened. No water. Well, this looks like a fairly new mixing elbow. I mean, they're usually just rusty as heck. when they're done for. So I got fooled. So there was no water being injected into the exhaust and cooling all this stuff off. So the moral of the story is, don't trust homemade vented loops. Use a proper boat vented loop. Force Bar sells one relatively cheap, in fact, with a proper check valve up here. No tube running down to the exhaust. That's just a bastardization of the system. So I'm going to go in the locker where the new muffler is, and there it is. She's a beauty. There's my new exhaust pipe running, and it comes out the back of the boat. So anyway, I'm now in Port Hardy, waiting for a new mixing elbow, a new vented loop, and the gaskets and things to put it all back together. So I thought I would just share that with anybody out there that's having an overheating problem, or should I say a muffler meltdown, no cooling in the exhaust system problem. Yanmar 2GM20, or any of the Yanmars that have that type of mixing elbow. Take that mixing elbow off, inspect it. Don't use a homemade vented loop. Use a good Force Bar. They're cheap, and they have the check valve, and do the maintenance on the check valve. Well, that little nipple is a little valve up there that you just inspect every now and then, make sure it's working. All right, well, that's all I've got today. Waiting a few days for my parts to come in, and I should be underway again. Take care, folks. Hope that helps.